be seated. Many of us hold cherished memories of the Christmas story. Flocks of sheep under a velvet night sky, weary innkeepers lit by flickering lanterns, and magi bearing treasures that gleam in the firelight. These scenes, embroidered into our tradition, stir our imaginations. Tonight, though, I want to invite you into a quieter, more intimate retelling of this beloved story. See, for centuries, nativity scenes have been shaped by layers and layers of European adaptation, blending Matthew and Luke's texts into one grand tapestry. While that story holds a place in our hearts, Luke's account tonight offers a portrait that feels earthy and tender, grounded in the everyday rhythms of life. Picture Bethlehem, not the bustling city of modern tourism, but a huddle of mud-plastered homes nestled in rocky hills under the vast stretch of a starlit sky. Olive trees cling to the slopes, their gnarled branches twisted by time, and the air carries the scent of earth, farm animals, and smoke. At the time of Jesus' birth, Bethlehem was more of a village than a city, a close-knit community of just a few hundred souls. Traditionally, we have imagined a crowded inn with a no vacancy sign hung crookedly on the door. However, the Greek word often translated as inn actually refers to a guest room within a multi-family house. Families were expected and honored to host their extended family when they traveled. Such homes had dirt floors and plastered brick walls. Sometimes the back of the house extended into a hollowed-out hillside. They typically included a large central space for cooking and gathering, with a smaller upper room for guests. And at night, animals were often brought into a corral in the back of the main room, where their warmth helped to heat the home on cooler nights. There was then, by necessity, a hollowed-out feeding trough in the dirt floor. An inn was unlikely in a small village, and if there was one, it would have only been available to a few very wealthy travelers. But we know that the Holy Family was poor. But then again, most people were poor at the time, living hand to mouth. But Mary and Joseph weren't outcasts turned away by strangers. They were family, returning to ancestral lands for this census and seeking shelter among their distant relatives. But with so many travelers crowding into the village this night, the guest room was already overflowing with bedrolls upstairs. So Mary and Joseph had to find their place in the common room amid the smells of food cooking and the low murmur of evening prayers. Notice, though, that they were not alone. They were far from their home, but they were home with family. Out in the hills, shepherds stood watch beneath the stars. These were ordinary folk, perhaps youth or hired hands, entrusted with the flocks that sustained their village. Their livelihood depended on vigilance and care, yet their work often left them unseen and uncelebrated. Back in the village, When Mary's time came, the women began their preparations. Labor is rarely a hurried affair, so they had time to prepare the space. I imagine the older children were shooed out of the way, maybe leading the goats up to the hills to graze with the sheep and keeping track of the younger children. Meanwhile, the women swept and scattered fresh straw, transforming the stable's humble corner into a place of warmth and care. Blankets were folded, water was fetched, and hands moved swiftly but carefully, practiced in the rituals of birth. The stable, rustic and dimly lit, became a sanctuary. And as dusk fell and shadows danced on the walls, the infant Jesus's first cries broke the stillness of the evening. At that moment, heaven and earth met not in grandeur, but in the quiet hum of human life. However, just beyond the village, a completely different scene unfolded. When the angels appeared, their radiance split the quiet night like lightning, terrifying the shepherds and the children. The angels began, "Do not be afraid," but I'm pretty sure their hearts still thundered in their chests. Then came the message, "Watch for a specific sign, a baby wrapped in swaddling cloth and resting in a manger." These lowly shepherds were chosen as the first to herald the news to the world. Can you see the shepherds running down that hill? Their feet pounding against the rocky ground, fear and wonder driving them forward. And imagine those children sprinting ahead with the goats in tow, returning home afraid and confused. Concerned adults come out of the house attempting to question them, but finding them wide-eyed and babbling about lights in the sky. The elders hush their chatter as they are brought to the fire to calm down. But as they are herded inside, one child after another stops, transfixed by the scene before them. A woman swaddling a freshly cleaned baby in a soft length of cloth. A child? A new baby? Lying in a manger? In their feeding trough? Oh, then the story comes flooding out. The children interrupt each other excitedly while one slipped out to find a shepherd, an adult, to verify their tale. Thus the story quickly spread around the village as the children whispered and pointed at their neighbor's house. Soon the entire household stirs. Mary, cradling the newborn, listened as the shepherds spoke of heavenly visions and proclamations of peace. The room was suffused with whispers and questions, yet at the center of it all lay the infant Jesus, vulnerable, ordinary, and holy. Luke's account is striking in its very ordinariness. God chose not a palace, but a crowded home filled with the smells of hearty food and gentle animals, filled with laughter and tears. Emmanuel, God with us, arrived amid life's regular, messy, brutal rhythms. How could the King of Kings come in such an ordinary way? How could he be but a vulnerable baby? is the miracle. God's presence does not wait for perfection. It slips into kitchens cluttered with dishes and evenings marked by exhaustion. If God could come to such a humble home in Bethlehem, then surely God is with us in our ordinary moments too. So this Christmas, we hold both stories. The grand pageant with kings and stars, and the tender scene of the baby swaddled in cloth. We remember that Emmanuel means God with us in our struggles and our joys, in our uncertainties and our celebrations. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a child, a Savior, who is Christ the Lord.